Avraham Avinu, our father Abraham. Good morning. We get to begin a new Torah portion today, a parashah, and Lech, which is the third parashah of the book of Genesis, deals with the story of the calling of Avraham, who is and was the first Jew. Everybody agrees. I know that I'll cover this really quickly. Everyone in Jewish history, ancient history, whatever source you want to use, everybody agrees that Avraham Avinu is the first Jew. Now, there are people who are watching who may not understand this because they've been taught incorrectly that the only people who can be Jews are the people who come from the tribe of Judah. But that, in fact, is not true. It's a very common mistake that non-Jews make. Typically, this idea comes from the Hebrew roots movement. It's based on some bad theology. It's based on some bad trying to reconcile. Okay, I'm not Jewish, wasn't born a Jew, but yet I'm in the covenant. Why do I feel, how am I in the covenant? Why am I in the covenant? Why do I want to, by covenant, I'm talking here about Torah observance, of course, which is the covenant. And people are trying to say, well, okay, I can keep Torah even though I'm not born a Jew. So therefore I must be Israel. I must be a Jew. I must be one of the lost 10 tribes or something like that. None of that is true, of course, and it's all just bad theology. There's also another root for that, by the way, that cannot be overlooked, and that is anti-Semitism. So most people, and I understand this when I say this, usually people are like, I'm not an anti-Semite. And I get that, but the reality is that to a large extent, a lot of what people, if you've come from the Christian church, particularly any denomination of the Christian church, because they're really all the same at the end of the day, if you've been baptized in the Christian church, you absolutely have somewhere you've been poisoned with anti-Semitism. It is, and because that happened to me, it happened to everybody I know. It's inevitable. Why is it inevitable? Because all of the church fathers, all of them, and I'm not talking here about the disciples. They're not the church fathers. I'm talking about the people who actually created the church, which is a bunch of Gentile, Roman, Greek people. They were all vehement anti-Semites, precursors to Adolf Hitler. Anyway, so naturally, that trickles down. So anyway, the point I'm trying to make here is that this I'm not a Jew thing is very much inherent. And so when people hear, well, Abraham can't be Jewish, he's not from the tribe of Judah. So let me explain this really quickly. By the way, glad you're here. Like our video, share it with your friends, talk about it at lunch today. It's going to be fantastic. Now, so people say he can't be Jewish because he's not from the tribe of Judah. Well, understand that the word Jew, yes, it comes from Judah. Yes, of course, that's its root from that word. But really, the word Jew actually means, and it doesn't mean I'm from Judah. It means that we are in the covenant and we are called by the name of the king because the king is the king of the Jews. He's also king of Israel because Israel and Jew are actually the synonymous terms, okay? Which is also synonymous with Hebrew. So all of this is very important. Now, the reason I bring this up is not just to play semantical word games, but it's rather so that all of us can get rid of all that garbage teaching that really prevents us from moving forward. Because a lot of these things, like I'm talking about here, prevent us from really diving in and understanding who Abraham was and therefore who we need to be. Now, I want to talk now about kind of the background of Abraham, because he's the first Jew. He is the father of our faith, clearly. He is the patriarch. In fact, when you say, well, no, to be a Jew, you have to be from the tribe of Judah. Again, that there's nothing biblical about that. Actually, there's nothing in ancient Jewish writings or anything about that. To illustrate this point, I want to tell you that from time immemorable and time immortal, whenever somebody was going to convert to Judaism, this would include Ruth, it would include Obadiah, Jethro, all of the matriarchs, every single one of them, all four of them, to include the other two women that were Jacob's wives that don't get mentioned as matriarchs, but they too. This would include Zipporah, the wife of Moses. It would include Onath, who was the wife of Joseph, and in a plethora of others. Okay, everybody. Rahab. There's another one. Everybody who goes through conversion, when they complete their conversion, they are referred to as sons or daughters of Abraham. Now, this is referring to Abraham and Sarah. So once you go through conversion, quite literally, your parents, not spiritually, not, mentally, but literally, Judaism reckons by Jewish law that you have now become a child of Abraham and Sarah. This is why Judaism is a faith, Judaism is a religion, and Judaism is a family. Ultimately, we are all related. Ultimately, but the bigger point I wanted you to see, which should be evident, is that since every Jew is connected ultimately to Abraham and Sarah, that is what ultimately makes us a Jew, and that means not only that they're our parents, but rather that we have embraced the covenant, the family of Abraham. I also want to mention that a lot of people have taught, again, erroneously and falsely, that there are multiple covenants. There was a covenant with Abraham. There was a covenant with Noah. There's a covenant with Abraham. There's a covenant with Moses. There's a covenant now with, the Messiah. And the reality is there isn't. There's only one covenant, which is why the ark is called the Ark of the Covenant, which is another reason why God told Moses he was going to save the people. He was going to save the people because of his promise he had made to who? Abraham. So there's just one covenant. Also, let me just say this as a precursor. A lot of people wonder, because it's taught so much today in so-called Messianic circles and Jewish circles too, of course, about the so-called Noahide covenant. Remember, there's only one covenant. There's only one. So therefore, there cannot be a covenant for the rest of humanity and a covenant for the Jews, right? Right. Because there's only one God and he has only one flock. This is why Yeshua said in Luke chapter 10, I'm going to call others who are not yet here, and I'm going to have one flock, say one. One is a very unique word in Hebrew and in English and also in Spanish and French, and I think also Japanese. It means, it's very weird, but it means one. Isn't that profound? So like one means like one. It means like one, like when he says one flock, he means like a singular one. It's very deep, what I just said now. And it's very mystical. And it's so mystical that people miss it because they teach like, okay, you can have Jew and Gentile, two groups of people that are somehow one in Messiah. It's like two flocks. But Yeshua said, I'm going to have one flock. And it's so mystical, that word one. It's so deep, so hard to articulate, so hard to grasp, so hard to define, that a lot of people miss it. And they have to come to shows like this where we have years of collegiate education and just profound divine insight, where we have to define that word, which means one, meaning a singular unity. It's really crazy, I know. So there you go. You're welcome. And so he says he's going to have one shepherd, which insinuates, implies, infers that there is going to be one teaching, not two. And so there's just one. So people ask me about the Noahide laws. Well, and why I don't believe in them. And first of all, why are they taught in messianic circles? Well, the reason in Jewish circles, we won't deal with that at the moment. I've already kind of done with that. But in the in the messianic circles, the reason that the Noahide thing is taught is because people are trying to make sense of Paul's letters. They're trying to make the whole Jew and Gentile one and Messiah thing make sense when it clearly doesn't. Listen, if you have a theology and you can't make it make sense, you have a theology and you're just struggling for it to be logical, or even worse, you're struggling for it to line up with Scripture, dump it. Dump it. Biblical faith is logical. I didn't say that we understand everything about it, and there are some esoteric concepts that we can have faith about, but we may not be able to articulate, 100%, such as the divinity of Messiah. There are questions there that will never be answered. However, the rest of our faith should have a logical flow, just like I just said. Of course, I was being facetious about the whole one thing, obviously. But if Yeshua said there's going to be one flock and one shepherd, there's going to be one flock and one shepherd. We don't have to do gymnastics to try to make that work. It's just, it is what it is. So leave it there. But anyway, the people come back to the Noahide laws and they ask, how come you don't believe in that? Well, one of the reasons, aside from it, for the fact that it has absolutely no biblical foundation whatsoever. Secondly, that the Talmud makes it clear that those laws went away a long, long time ago at Mount Sinai. And thirdly, there is no evidence anywhere in any historical document anywhere prior to the mid-20th century where Jews were running around trying to get the nations to become Noahides. Did you know that? Zero, zilch, nada. There are no historical records anywhere of Jews at any point in history who were trying to get the nations to become Noahides, except and until Rebbe Sneerson of Chabad decided that that's what they were going to do. Now, in fact, you see the exact opposite. You know what there is history of? Going all the way back to the Midrash, Rabbah, the Talmud, the Zohar, and then other historical documents. There is a plethora. There's a word for you. There's a plethora of evidence, documentation of Jews, to include Abraham and Sarah, running around the world, adamantly attempting to make Gentiles Jews. Did you know that? Dun, dun, dun. So much history to that. Now, so I'm a logical person. I try to be anyway. I do my very best to make sense. So logically, if I don't have any evidence of any of my Jewish forefathers in the Middle Ages, in antiquity, going all the way back to my father Abraham and my mother Sarah, zero, zilch, nada. No one ever trying to make Gentiles Noahides. However, what I do see them doing is trying to make Gentiles Jews. Then logically, I'm going to try to do that. Just like Yeshua said, if you were truly children of Abraham, you would be doing the works of Abraham, your father. Well, the question becomes, what were his works? That's a good question, right? Well, first of all, let's begin with Abraham's background, because this might be inspiring. How many of you that are listening to me now, your background, I would venture to guess that most of you, your background is not Jewish. that you have you have a lot of family and friends who are not observant, and even people who are Jewish that want to come into the faith and so forth. Keep in mind that the vast majority of Jews in the world today, 80-90%, are not observant in any appreciable way. And I will tell you, because there's other discussions about this, that those people also face problems. When people come from Jewish families that aren't observant, one might think, oh, well, their family was reform or basically secular, and now they've become, really observant, and it's just happy-go-lucky. No, not necessarily. Because now maybe you have a father who's not observant, and now his son or daughter is now really observant, and that creates tension in the family almost as much as it does when the father is nothing or Christian or whatever, and the child has now become, the adult child, of course, has now become a Jew through Messiah Yeshua. So my point is there's tension. There can be tension there, okay? And I'm saying this because I want to encourage you, because we all come from situations where one way or the other, if you're Jewish, you have family who aren't observant. And if you're not Jewish, you have family that are Christian or Muslim or Hindu or something like that. And there's tension, and we have to work through that tension. We have to work through those questions. We have to work through those dynamics. And for a lot of people, it's like, oh man, this is really tough. And yikes, this is really it's stressing me out, and rightfully so. And I don't want to take away from that, because it is stressful. You have to navigate things like, can I go to your Christmas thing? No, I can't. Can I go to your Easter egg hunt? No, I can't. But you can come to Hanukkah, and trying to explain that is challenging. Now, how many of your parents make idols for a living? I'm waiting to see the chat here. Anybody's parents, mommy, daddy, or both, or one or the other, actually have idols are us, and maybe it's on online, maybe they sell them on Amazon. Your mommy and daddy actually do in fact make idols. They're not just idol worshipers. They actually produce idols. They have an idol craft shop. It's an idol version of Hobby Lobby. Anybody? Wait, I'm looking at the chat. Anybody? No, we just have a few. I don't want to take too much time with this. Who out there has mom and dad makes idols? Nobody? Well, Abraham's dad did. Abraham's father had an idol shop. Yes. Not only did Abraham live in a world that was engulfed in idolatry. Now, Abraham wasn't completely alone. Okay. If you read the ancient sources, you find that Shem is still alive and Noah is still alive, and they are studying Torah. They actually have a yeshiva, actually. We don't have time to get into those sources, but there are sources about that. They actually have a yeshiva. So Noah is not all by himself, but he is the first to take this information and begin to preach it. But before I get into that, I want to say Abraham. Did I say Noah a second ago? Noah's alive. Shem's alive. They have a yeshiva. It's Abraham who, I feel like I just said Noah began to preach it. Maybe I didn't. But anyway, Abraham began to preach it. But what I want to point out here, and it's for all of our encouragement. Abraham not only lives in a world that is completely engulfed in idolatry, but his daddy actually makes idols and sells them and has an idol or us. Now, guys, that's a whole nother level. That's a whole nother level. And so you and I are struggling with family dynamics, and I take nothing away from that. But my encouragement to you is, imagine if you were one of a handful of people who even believed in the one true God. And then not only did you have all of your friends and family that were idolaters, but your father himself actually owns and operates an idol shop. That's Abraham. And so Abraham is born. There's another story about the birth of Abraham, similar to that of the birth of Noah, where there was light and so forth. But what's unique about his story, not mentioned in the story of the birth of Abraham, is that there was a particular star that shone in the heavens. Yes. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, there's nothing new in the New Testament. There is a star that was bright in the sky and shone down light when Abraham was born. And as a result, the sorcerers and what have you went to Nimrod, who was king at this time, and told him that, hey, there's somebody who was born here that's going to destroy your kingdom. And so it was actually Nimrod who wanted to murder the child Abraham. And therefore, Abraham had to be hidden away. Again, it's like the gospel story retold. And there's a reason, and that is because God always gives us a pattern. Okay? He had to be hidden away. Yeshua had to be taken to Egypt, and so on and so forth. Later, Abraham was actually thrown into the fire, thrown into a fiery furnace, and was miraculously. He was thrown into a fiery furnace by Nimrod, and was miraculously saved. And that had to do, if memory serves me correctly, and I pray that I'm not making an error here in my stories, but I believe that had to do with the fact that Abraham destroyed all of his father's idols in the Idols R Us that was at 5th and 7th Street in Ur Chaldees. And as a result of that, he was thrown into the fire furnace, but God saved him. Now, I want to read this insight from Rabbi Monk's commentary here, because this is also instructive to us. And I'm going to share another insight that actually comes from the days of Noah that Zach and Yigal texted me about this morning. And I was going to share this particular insight last week, but I just never got around to it. But hey, Gamzula Tova, Enod Movado. The reason why I wasn't supposed to share it then is because it actually matches almost verbatim what is said about Abraham here. And this is something else that you and I've talked a lot lately, particularly about outreach. And Lapid Judaism, ladies and gentlemen, we have to be people who go out and in love and in kindness, we have to preach this gospel. We have to. And remember what I said about Noah. Noah's big critique was that he did not. And that was his big critique. And if we're not out about trying to fish for people, then we're not doing what Yeshua told us to do. Yeshua said, go and baptize the nations. We didn't really say baptize. He would have said basically tavel in a mikveh, immerse them in a mikveh. What does that mean? So when Yeshua said that, when Yeshua said, go to the nations and immerse them in a mikveh, in the first century Judaism, Jewish lingo, what was the Messiah meaning when he said that? Guys, please listen to me right now. Take this to the proverbial bank. If you're a Jewish person and you're standing there listening to the resurrected Messiah, and he tells you, go into all the world and immerse Gentiles in a mikveh in the name of the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. What that means to you at that instant is get them converted. Make them Jews, because there's no such thing. Hear me here, please. I'm serious. There's no such thing as immersing a Gentile in water of a mikveh and them coming out of the mikveh still a Gentile. That doesn't exist. There's no precedent for that. There's nothing, zero, zilch, nada. So I need you to understand this. Now, why did Yeshua say that? Because that's exactly what Abraham and Sarah set out to do. Abraham and Sarah themselves were Gentiles before they became Jews. And they set about trying to make the whole world Jewish. There is what I just told you is recorded in any work of Judaism. The fact that they sought not to make Noahides. By the way, you cannot be a believer in Messiah and be a Noahide. Did you know that? It is impossible to believe in the Messiah, any Messiah, and still be a Noahide. In order to believe in the Messiah, you have to be a Jew. And by the way, if you read the Zohar or any other work, did you know that in the Garden of Eden, that is paradise, the Olam Haba, where we go when we die, so to speak, did you know that there are I was just reading this in the Legends of the Jews. There are 7 places in Gan Eden for all the different types of Jews, proselytes, people who made tshuva, Baal Tshuvot, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Or about, whatever. I said that wrong. But anyway, it doesn't matter. All these different places. Did you know that of those 7 spots, is this microphone on? Can you hear me? There is no place for Noahides. Did you know that there are no sources anywhere in any Jewish document, anywhere, that says that there is a place in heaven, so to speak, and a place in the Olam Haba for Noahides? Did you know that? What are you being sold? You're being sold oceanfront property in Arizona. Now listen to this insight with what I just said. But this is from Rabbi Monk. But what made him, that is Abraham, a giant in the history of mankind? What made him a giant in the history of mankind was the eloquence and forcefulness with which he preached the truth and converted others to his faith. Okay? It was the indomitable courage he showed in fiercely opposing the idolatrous cult, and it was above all his boundless love for God. Now, this love manifested itself on the one hand in an unceasing love of others, and on the other hand, in continuous, unlimited, unhesitant, and unwavering devotion to God. Abraham, it says here, was not a visionary. He wasn't a sage immersed in mystical contemplation, not an erudite philosopher, not a fanatic, or even an exalted prophet. He was, quite simply, a man, a seeker of truth, with a generous heart and a fervent soul. Abraham's religion was not limited to prayers, beliefs, rituals, or mortifications. It was first and foremost made up of devotion, ceaseless devotion, despite many obstacles. Abraham's religion demands the complete self. It admits no duplicity. For man must be whole, integral. There must be a unity in his life, just as God is one in the universe. Wow, what an amazing statement about who Avraham Avinu, who Abraham our father was. But I want you to understand this, because it's a very important point. Abraham preached the truth, Rabbi Monk says, and converted others to his faith. Now understand, Judaism says that Abraham is the first Jew, and he was. That is a truth. So therefore, if he converted others to his faith, in his faith, because as Jews, we are sons and daughters of Abraham and Sarah. That means that he converted people to Judaism. It's critical. This is why we must be about our Father's business. This is why the Noahide thing, the Messianic Gentile thing are, frankly, satanic distractions, not rooted in any biblical truth. Isaiah 2:3. Isaiah 2:3, among so many other verses, completely dispels that mythology. But this is the insight that that Zake and Yigal shared with me, that Rabbi Monk has in last week's Torah portion, that I didn't have a chance to share, but now I want to read it in light of what I just read about Abraham. It has to do with the true servant of God. And this, ladies and gentlemen, is a message to all of us. What is the true servant of God? And this is the question that you and I have to ask ourselves. Are we truly servants of God? It says the true servant of God is not a visionary, not a sage plunged into mystical contemplation, not a subtle philosopher, not a fanatic or an exalted prophet. This is almost verbatim what he just said about Abraham. His religion, far from being limited to prayers and beliefs and ritual practices or mortifications, is first and foremost made up of absolute devotion to God. This devotion knows no bounds. It is never failing, ready to sacrifice fortune, even life itself, one's dearest affections, everything for the love of God. The sacrifices are but the concretization of this ecstasy of devotion. Our Torah observance is only, it's putting, what Torah observance is, ladies and gentlemen, when we do this, that, or the other, is simply taking our emotional love for God, our deep faith, our immense trust that we have in God, and putting it in a concrete form. Hence, our sages say, when God smelled the pleasant odor emanating from Noah's sacrifice, it reminded him, because God sees the end from the beginning, of the pleasant odor which would arise from the sacrifice when Abraham entered into the fiery furnace out of love for God, and for the same pleasant odor which came from the sacrifice of Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah, who also entered into the fiery furnace of Nebuchadnezzar, and also the voluntary sacrifices of innumerable victims of persecution, massacres, and so on. God would see this selfless devotion, and that is what gave him a pleasant aroma. End of our Aliyah today. We're just getting started. I've just scratched the surface. What I shared with you today is not much more than a drop in the ocean of who Abraham is and what this Torah portion means to all of us. So stay tuned. God willing, the rest of the week, we will get through as much of it as humanly possible. Main thing is, let's do our best to go out there today and encourage people to embrace the truth of God's word, especially today, this wicked, wicked day that so many people who supposedly believe in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob are celebrating. It's really sad, but may God help us today to reach those precious souls. God love all of you. Like our video, share with your friends, comment on it. That always is inspiring to see everybody's help and so forth. And bless you. Thank you so much for being here. Look forward to seeing you tomorrow with God's help.